So I'll kick us off, and then we'll
Okay.
go. All right. This is the AP5 Arts intern team, and we're here today with Russel Balenger to do an interview about his experience living in the Rondo community.
Okay. What you're going to do with this is try to reconstruct or rebuild the neighborhood or an area.
So we'll focus on one building.
One building.
We can maybe fit in two given the time frame, but we'll focus on getting as much detail and kind of love for that place as possible. Pack it all into that one build to try to recreate it as faithfully as we can.
Okay.
So to kick us off, I want to ask, why get involved with this project? What interests you about it?
I like stuff like this. It kind of develops community and pulls people in.
All right. How long have you lived in the Frogtown, Rondo, area? Did you grow up here, or did you move here later?
I was born 4 blocks down the street at 812 St. Anthony. So that was back in 1950. I knew this area a little bit because my uncle had a restaurant on the corner. It was a barbecue. It was mainly barbecue, but they served everything. It was called Road Buddies. And it was pretty much the only restaurant I can remember, black restaurant I can remember from back in that time. I think it was probably because my sister was the chef there that we would get to taste the barbecue quite often. And I don't know if you know this, but back in those days, St. Paul was kind of a haven for some of the gangsters of the day that came out of Chicago, and they used to love to come to that restaurant. Have you ever heard of Al Capone? Well, my sister's husband is a French-Irish guy, my oldest sister. She met there at the restaurant. His mother was Al Capone's girlfriend's girlfriend. And she would ride with him on Sundays when he was going to make pickups. I went to school just straight over from Victoria at Maxfield Elementary School. I started the year that it opened. At the time it had been fairly segregated. In my first grade year, my new teacher had blue eyes. Her name was Mrs. Parlin. She was an excellent teacher. Most all the kids that were in our class have done pretty well for themselves. And Mrs. Parlin Capone now is still in my life. She's 95. I received a letter from her on Saturday telling me her experience in the neighborhood and the work she did in the community. And it might be hard to imagine, but black people weren't on Selby yet. I was 8 years old the first time I walked up on Selby, which was 1 block from our house. The police stopped me and put me up against the wall, and hands up against the wall, went through my pockets. My mother never knew about that because she told me not to go up on Selby. So I didn't tell her.
What do you like best about the neighborhood, and where are the places that matter most?
There's a sense of community that developed and that I still feel some part of. I still live in the community. I still own the house that we moved to. I've seen a lot of kids grow up. And as new people moved in the neighborhood, I would try to teach them how we handled things in our neighborhood. I would tell them I was the mayor of the neighborhood. Sometimes I would get someplace and people would, after I've talked to them for a while, they'd ask me, do you know the mayor of the neighborhood over there? It's me. Because they always want to call the police. I'd say, wait. Let's talk about it. When we came up, a lot of our folks would tell us at night, make sure the back door is unlocked in case somebody needs to get in. There was a family called the Birches that lived not too far from here that would put a sign out in front of their house when they went south to visit the grandparents or their families there. They'd leave a sign on the front of the house that there's food in here, and if you need something to eat, come in and eat, but make sure you clean up behind yourself. One thing about the neighborhood was everybody knew everyone. I think you should know that the Rondo neighborhood was not all black. It was predominantly black area where black people could move. At the time the freeway came through, there was redlining, and if you were non-white, there was only certain areas that you would be allowed to buy a home. I think everybody across the street from us, every family except for one, Mrs. Lee was black, but the rest of the neighbors on that side of the street were all white. And there were Native people and our indigenous folks. There were a few Asian families. There were a few Latino families. And we all, the kids from each of those families, we made up the baseball team down at Oxford, and we actually won it was a state championship. We had a large house that had 3 floors furnished, and my father rented rooms to people that were coming from the south, railroad men that needed a place to stay on the layovers. The house was built in 1898. My father put an addition on the house in 1948. Well, what I can say about that house, you have to understand, I was little. It was the house I was growing up in. It was the house that I knew. I had just had a stack of books, and I was young, but I could read. I started reading really early. My favorite book was No Dessert Until You Finish Your Mashed Potatoes. I've never been able to find it again. We didn't have a TV yet. And one day I looked up and there was a TV up there and Mighty Mouse was on. It's like, I feel like it was my first memory. I looked up and I said, what's that? And then I remember that Christmas we got a console with the TV and the phonograph and the radio. My mother kept a very lovely home for us. The walls were of Kelly green, the woodwork was white trim. My mother wanted a picture window in the front of that house because that's what she was seeing in the magazine. And one day my father was tired of hearing of it, and he went out and the sledgehammer started to knock out the front of the house. She was screaming at first, but he was just putting in this picture window she wanted. We had a beautiful garden, and I think it was important that the place have a certain look to it, so people felt like they were coming to a nice place. In the basement, there was a washing machine, but I don't think you've ever seen one. Maybe you have in an antique store where you would put your clothes in the roller and it would help get the water out of them so that you could hang them on the line and dry your clothes. When you came through the front door, there was a stairway that curved and bent to go up to the next floor. And to the left of it was the door that went directly into the area we lived in.
You brought up the house burned down.
Mm-hmm.
Were you in the building when it caught fire? What happened?
So, yeah, it was a day like today. It was cold. It happened. It was still dark, but it was about to lighten up. I heard a noise. It was like something was bumping around. And I said something to my sister, and my mother looked up and she heard something, and we went upstairs. And on that porch that my father had put in, the fire was going. And it was a pretty good blaze. There was no time to grab clothes. And we were standing outside across the street in our underwear. And the house was engulfed with flames. The fire department finally got there, and they just kind of shrugged it off. They said it was called the biggest residential fire of the year. I remember my mother saying that. It was, I'm going to say that was 1957. The people that owned the drugstore lived across the street, the fields, and they took us in their house. And my mother went and got us clothes. But I can see the flames. I can see the house engulf right now. You'd come up the steps from the outside, and I remember they were cement steps because the day or two after the fire, I got out of school over at Maxfield and forgot and walked home, and that's all that was there was the steps. I always think somebody threw something up there. They were trying to get people to leave the neighborhood. The straightest way to take 94 would have been to take it through Pierce Butler. And it was already set up with track, and it was open, but they chose to run it right through this neighborhood. It didn't just happen to Rondo, it happened in 800 other communities across the country. And when I say the freeway was being built, it was like that hole, that area where the houses all were, that was all dug out, and it was sand in there, and the bridges that went over. But it was 10 years before we started to see the asphalt, and I was on my way. By the time the freeway was laid in there, I was taking it to Moorhead. So it was a pretty sore spot. when there'd be a storm and the wind would blow, it was blowing that sand and that dust and the dirt. The houses were disappearing. Most were torn down. Others were moved to other places. That meant people had to get out of the house. The house was taken, and they couldn't even go with it. And then they didn't give people the money that their homes were valued at. So, you know, there were a lot of people that were displaced, but everyone's story is different. So some people that lost their house would end up staying with another family until they could figure out something else. Our family was split up for a few months, spread out after our home burned down, while my mother and father waited on the home that they wanted, which was 4 side streets up from where we lived. But even then, we were the first black family on Dayton Avenue. It was a duplex, but the basement was finished. There was a family there when we moved in, but and they were very nice people. But after a month, they said they just couldn't rent from us because we were black. When we moved in, the people in the neighborhood said that the kids couldn't play together. And we didn't understand that. There was a vacant lot up around the block, and they would go one way and we'd go the other. We'd meet up there and have a good old time. Walked home together. Holy smokes. People were running out of the house. What are you kids doing together? They're like, oops. But after I got further out, then people began to move in next door. As what they called it was white flight. When we moved into that house on Dayton Avenue, everybody else for sale signs came up. People were moving away. It was like the neighborhood began to grow. It just moved further. And it wasn't called the Rondo neighborhood. Now people take pride in calling it the Rondo neighborhood. There was a time when it was, because it was so many people of color, that it was labeled a slum. But now people have come and they see that it's very nice housing stock, and it's expensive to move in.
How did these spaces change over time, and what time period do you remember them most strongly?
When that happened with the freeway, most of the ministers came out and they tried to fight to save the neighborhood, but what did happen is that there was a walking bridge that you could cross the freeway wherever there was a church. I remember walking across the Dale Street Bridge, because one of my jobs was I was an altar boy with the Episcopal Church on Aurora. So on Sundays I had to get up and get over there and help Father get things together. And there would be people sleeping under those bridges. And there was still no freeway yet. Oh. There's not nearly the number of businesses as there used to be. And maybe it's just the time, and maybe it's the way commerce is moving. I've watched and seen as some businesses left Rondo, and some ended up over on Selby, and the neighborhood changed, and there was a lot going on, and now it's changed again. And if I'm lucky, I'll see another change.
What is the most significant thing that you want to see modeled in the structure we created? So, what if nothing else needs to be represented in order to reflect this place like art?
I guess that it just shows that it would show that it was a lovely home that was well cared for, and the area around it was lovely too. And that it was a beautiful neighborhood and it wasn't a slum. I don't remember any part of it that looked like it was rough times.